Vic Mullen, grumpy old Scotsman. How we all doing, folks? Don't know if anyone's been keeping track on the Caerphilly by-election news. So the sitting MP for Caerphilly, sitting MP for Labour, Jeff, can't remember his name now. I know his first name was Jeff. Hold on, I need to bring this up. Jeff, I got the first name right. Jeff Cuthbert. He died. I think he died of a heart attack. But he was the MP for Caerphilly, which is a town in Wales, and Labour have held that seat for over 100 years. It's been a staunch foundation stone of the Labour Red Wall. Now, the Red Wall takes place in two places: the north of England, although that kind of crumbled under Boris Johnson, and vast segments of Wales with smaller red walls. And these are the areas that Labour essentially rely on to either remain as the opposition with a good second majority, or, in the case of now, win an election. They used to have red walls in Scotland, but they're all gone now because the SNP took care of that. I think Labour only hold one major council in Scotland, and the SNP hold the other 53, along with Liberal Democrats up in the north of Scotland and the Highlands. I think they hold about 5, so the majority is the SNP. Labour are gone. They're gone in Scotland. They're just gone. And it's been like that for a while now, to be honest. So Labour essentially rely on the north of England, Wales, and vast segments of London. The rest of England, it's a toss-up between the rest of the parties. That's what it basically comes down to, with, of course, the Conservatives taking up the majority of the rest of those seats in England. Labour lost the seat of Caerphilly after holding it for more than a century. Let's take a look at the results, because the results are kind of interesting. Let's put you over there. I done the quick and dirty and just done a grok search thing, and it came up with all the info at the top. Lindsay Whittle of PLAID Cymru secured a 47, that's just under half the vote, 47.4% of the vote in the Caerphilly Senedd by-election on October the 23rd, 2025, ending Labour's hold on the seat since 1918, following the death of MS Jeff Cuthbert. That's member of the Senedd, not member of Parliament. Reform UK's Lear, I think that's Lur, either Lear or Lur Powell, took second place. So this is Reform UK taking second place with 36% of the vote, a surge from only 1.8% of the vote in 2021. While Labour's Richard Tunnicliffe received just 11%. The result, with 40% turnout among 33,686 voters, signals shifting Welsh political dynamics ahead of the 2026 Senedd elections. And this is the important point here. And this is why, if I was Keir Starmer, I would be extremely worried, because the problem here for Keir Starmer is a very simple one. This is a by-election, so there wasn't, how can I word this right? There wasn't a lot of political advertising, basically. So there wasn't the usual political party broadcast, because it was a local by-election. Of course, there was canvassers popping pamphlets into people's front doors and letterboxes, that kind of thing. But there wasn't a big push. And I think the reason there wasn't a big push is because Labour honestly thought they would be keeping that seat, because they've had it for over 100 years now. But the fact that there was literally an almost 50 to 60% swing away from Labour towards Plaid Cymru, and more especially a massive swing towards Reform UK, which puts Reform in second place and bumps Labour down to third with only 11% share of the vote. If I was Keir Starmer, I would be very, very worried right now, because we are less than a year away from the 2026 elections in Wales and the 2026 elections for the Scottish Parliament in Holyrood. We're less than a year away. Now, I think Keir Starmer already knows he's got zero hope up here. Zero hope up here in Scotland. The SNP, and for that matter, Reform, from what I've been seeing, have got Scotland locked up. But the fact that the red wall voting areas of Wales are going to fall, if this is anything to go by, if the Caerphilly election is anything to go by, vast sections of the red Labour wall in Wales are about to fall in the 2026 elections. And what you're going to end up seeing is, instead of a Labour Party having a slim majority or an overall majority with power sharing in the Welsh Senedd, it's going to be Plaid Cymru, a nationalist party like the Scottish Nationalist Party. And what you're going to end up seeing, if Plaid Cymru end up getting an overall outright majority with a large number of seats in the Welsh Parliament, you're gonna start seeing calls for independence, because it's already starting to happen in Wales. We've already had the independence shot up here, and it failed. It failed miserably, albeit by a slim margin, but it did fail miserably. But if Plaid Cymru end up getting the majority, like the overall majority, with no need for power sharing in the Welsh Parliament, you're going to see an independence vote starting to be demanded. If it turns out that after the May 2026 elections, Plaid Cymru end up getting that majority, you are going to see calls for an independence vote, where the population, the citizens of Wales, vote to either stay within the United Kingdom or go fully independent. Now, admittedly, with Plaid Cymru, they're not as pushy about independence as the Scottish National Party was during Alex Salmond's term and Nicola Sturgeon's term. They've kind of dropped the whole independence thing under John Swinney, but that's John Swinney. He's an idiot. Just an idiot. Flip-flop Swinney. That's what everyone calls him. But this, the fact that Labour went from holding a seat for more than 100 years to now getting 11% of the vote, with a massive over 50% swing towards Plaid Cymru, who got 47% of the vote, and the big news about all of this, Reform, who got 36% of the vote. Does Labour even represent this country anymore? Do they? When it gets to the stage that they are falling apart when it comes to by-elections and losing seats with a massive 50 to 60% swing, we can now realise here, folks, that what we're basically looking at is staunch, foundation level, like staunch, foundation, bedrock level, Labour supporters turning their backs on Labour. A party they've probably voted for, a party they've probably supported for most of their lives. And it's like the switch has been turned off. They're going to Plaid Cymru, or they're going to Reform. I think the final numbers for, and I remember watching the by-election results on GB News. I think it was something along the lines of 15,000 votes went to Plaid Cymru, and something along the lines of 11 to 12,000 votes went to Reform UK, with the other parties getting low thousands or hundreds So for Caerphilly, the two major parties, instead of being Labour or Plaid Cymru, which it usually was, it's now Plaid Cymru or Reform UK. Now if that pattern repeats itself across the rest of Wales during the 2026 elections, with that big of a swing either towards Reform or towards Plaid Cymru, you're going to be looking at the utter decimation of the Labour Party in Wales, replaced with seats for Plaid Cymru and most especially seats for Reform UK in the Welsh former Labour heartlands. If I was Keir Starmer, I'd just want to quit now. I just want to walk away now before it got any worse. Because do you want to be the sitting Prime Minister and the sitting leader of the Labour Party while the Labour Party is in free fall collapse? Because that kind of thing is going to stick with you for the rest of your political life. If I was Keir Starmer, I would seriously be considering resigning round about now. I would, because I wouldn't want to be the sitting Prime Minister and the sitting leader of the Labour Party during a Welsh Senedd election in 2026 and sitting back in number 10 Downing Street and seeing seat after seat after seat for the Labour Party just evaporate like that. Just evaporate and go to Reform UK or Plaid Cymru. Now granted, a lot of people are saying that Plaid Cymru is basically Labour in sheep's clothing, and yeah, they kind of are. Plaid Cymru are a lot like the Labour Party, and I hope the people of Caerphilly are recognising this, because the major supporters and the major members of the Senedd for Plaid Cymru in Wales have openly said they welcome illegal migrants. They actually said this publicly. They welcome illegal migrants to their hotels. So if you're living in Caerphilly, you should have voted Reform. You should have voted Reform. Plaid Cymru, in some sense, is Labour under a different name. They take the same basic, fundamental ideas from the sitting Labour government or the sitting Labour Party that's in the Welsh Assembly as it stands right now. So expect more illegal migrants in Caerphilly. It's going to happen because you voted in Plaid Cymru and you've now got a sitting member of Plaid Cymru as the MS, as the member of the Senedd. So it's going to happen. It's going to happen. You should have voted Reform. If you wanted actual change in Caerphilly, you should have voted Reform. But you went for Plaid Cymru instead. I mean, okay, fair enough. Fair enough. It's one less seat for Labour. Fair enough. But you've essentially just voted in another version of the Labour Party. The whole illegal immigration thing, if you look at seats that are held by Plaid Cymru in Wales, you will notice that those seats compared to other seats held by other parties in Wales, the Plaid Cymru seats, the Plaid Cymru constituents in the Senedd, something like 20 to 40% more illegal migrants in those areas compared to other areas in Wales. And we all know what happens when you start bringing in a lot of illegal migrants. It's a fact. Crime goes up. It's a fact. Homicides, murders go up. It's a fact. The rape of small British white children go up when you bring in more illegal migrants. I hope you know what you voted for, Caerphilly residents. I don't think some of you actually do, though. I don't think you do. Still, you can always change your mind when it comes to the point of the 2026 Senedd elections, because there will be another election for Caerphilly in about 7 months' time. There's got to be, even though a by-election has already taken place. But I hope a lot of you that vote for Plaid Cymru do your research before the actual major 2026 elections come up, because the worrying part about Plaid Cymru is how pro-illegal immigration. A lot of the members of the Senedd actually are. They're pro-illegal immigration. They like illegal immigrants coming in. Yeah, you should have done your research. You should have. That's the worrying part about Plaid Cymru. That's the singular worrying part. A lot of the other things that Plaid Cymru stand for, I kind of agree with them. Plaid Cymru, at its heart, is a old school, traditional, socialist party. Now, when I say socialist, and all you US people, I'm not talking about communism. I'm talking British centre-left. British centre-left. Old school socialism. That's what Plaid Cymru is. A lot of their basic fundamental foundations of the party was essentially lifted from Michael Foot and Neil Kinnock's version of the old Labour Party before Tony Blair wrecked it and Labour basically turned into Tory light blue. So I kind of nod in agreement with a lot of Plaid Cymru's suggestions when it comes to how to run Wales, when it comes to balancing the Welsh budget. But the problem with Plaid Cymru is they've got a lot of new left joining their party. And when I say new left, I mean the people with... I'm just going to come out and say it. The people that usually have nose rings. The people that are usually overweight with nose rings, like morbidly obese overweight with nose rings. The people that usually have green, pink, purple, blue or orange hair who are overweight, morbidly obese with nose rings. Those kinds of people, you can instantly single out who the far left wingnut lunatics are just by looking at them. Because they kind of all look the same. You know, they haven't had a shower or had a bath in 2 or 3 weeks. They usually don't have a job. They're usually paid to go out and protest, which is what happens with a lot of these far-left protest groups. They're actually paid to go out to protest, and they're usually pro-illegal immigration. They're usually pro-calling everyone else that's slightly right of them a Nazi, and they're usually pro-sticking it to anyone who's even a little bit, a tiny bit to the right of them. Those kind of people have been infesting Plaid Cymru for the past decade, and it's starting to show with what a lot of the Plaid Cymru members of the Senedd are now saying. Because about 10 years ago, Plaid Cymru was an anti-illegal immigration party. They were anti-illegal immigration. Just like the Tories. Anti-illegal immigration. They firmly believe that if you wanted to immigrate and move into Wales, you had to do it legally and you had to do it through the proper channels. Which I'm fine with. Legally and through the proper channels. But over the past 10 years, the usual suspects from the far left wingnut lunatic brigade started infesting Plaid Cymru. Now they're pro-illegal immigration. They welcome illegal immigrants into the hotels of the towns and villages that they are supposed to be representing. That's why crime in those areas, in Plaid Cymru held areas, has went up between 20 to 30% over the past 5 years. That's why there's a growing number of protests by Welsh families who are scared, literally scared, for their young daughters who are walking to school past these migrant hotels. Plaid Cymru is a decent enough party. They're a decent enough party, but they're becoming infested with the far left-wing lunatics. You should have voted Reform. But still, too late. Too late. Plaid Cymru is now in Caerphilly, and Labour has lost one of their bedrock foundational, literal bedrock foundational cornerstones of the Welsh Red Wall. I would be extremely surprised if Keir Starmer is still the sitting Prime Minister and leader of the Labour Party before, or even during, coming to think of it, during the Welsh Senedd elections and the Scottish elections, because any Prime Minister worth their salt would just simply not want to be a sitting Prime Minister who's overseeing the complete and total collapse of the foundation councils of your party while sitting as Prime Minister. Nobody would want to do that. Nobody. I would be very surprised if Keir Starmer would still be the sitting Prime Minister when the local elections come up next year. If this is anything to go by, the sheer numbers of the percentage swing away from Labour to fill up Plaid Cymru votes and to fill up Reform votes. I mean, that jump, just looking at it, 2021, Reform only held 1.8 of the vote, 1.8% of the vote in Caerphilly. That jumped to 36%. 36% swing. Well, not 36% swing. 35% swing. From 1% to 36% in less than 4 years. Less than 4 years. If that swing, if that percentage swing carries on into the rest of the Labour held seats in Wales, that's it. Labour's done. They're done. They are finished in Wales. They're finished in Scotland, which means the only two places they've got to rely on is Northern Ireland, where they don't hold any seats as far as I know, and England. And when it gets to the stage that any political party can only rely on the votes of one of the countries in the United Kingdom, they will never hold power again. We could technically be looking at the last sitting Labour government.